The bass from the speakers pulsed through the soles of my worn-out flats as I pushed past the crowd, balancing a tray of empty champagne glasses. My black uniform blended with the shadows of Elysium, Chicago's most exclusive nightclub, where I'd been working double shifts for the past 3 weeks. The air hung heavy with expensive perfume, cigarette smoke, and desperation. Mine, specifically. "Sophie, table 14 needs another bottle." Marcos, the floor manager, barked as he passed. I nodded, not bothering to remind him that my name was Sarah. After 6 months, he still got it wrong, and I'd stopped caring. In places like this, servers were interchangeable ghosts, moving between tables of people who never looked up from their phones long enough to see our faces. I tucked a strand of honey-brown hair behind my ear, feeling it immediately fall loose again from the messy bun I'd hastily arranged in the staff bathroom. My feet ached, my lower back screamed, and the rent on my studio apartment was 3 days overdue. The eviction notice taped to my door that morning had made it clear. Another week without payment, and I'd be homeless. "Not tonight," I whispered to myself, plastering on a practiced smile as I approached the bar. "Tonight, I make enough in tips to buy myself another week." The bartender, Damon, slid a fresh bottle of champagne into an ice bucket. "VIP table by the window," he said, eyes flicking toward the exclusive section cordoned off with velvet ropes. "Don't spill it. That's a $1,000 bottle, more than half my monthly rent, sloshing around in a fancy bottle for people to spray on each other." I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat and lifted the heavy silver bucket. "Wait." Damon caught my wrist, his expression softening. "Your ex is here. Just walked in with some blonde. Thought you should know." My heart plummeted to the sticky floor. Michael. The cold, symmetrical features of his face flashed across my mind. The same face that had promised me the world before emptying our joint bank account and disappearing with my college fund. 6 months of radio silence. And now he was here. Probably spending my money. "Where?" I managed to ask, though part of me didn't want to know. Damon nodded toward the entrance. "Just getting seated in the main area." I turned, and time seemed to slow as my eyes found him. Michael looked exactly the same. Perfectly coiffed dark hair, pressed shirt, the Rolex I'd helped him pick out for his birthday. His arm was wrapped around a woman so thin and polished she looked airbrushed. They laughed together, their teeth flashing white under the club lights, and I felt my chest constrict. 6 months of overtime shifts, instant ramen, and crying myself to sleep, while he hadn't missed a single cocktail or shopping spree. The injustice of it burned in my throat. "Thanks," I mumbled to Damon, gripping the ice bucket so tightly my knuckles blanched. I wound through the crowd, focusing on not spilling a single drop. The champagne was destined for a corner table, the most exclusive spot in Elysium, partially concealed behind sheer curtains and guarded by a mountain of a man in a black suit. As I approached, the guard's eyes swept over me, assessing and dismissing me in the same moment. He stepped aside without a word. I slipped through the parted curtain and entered a different world. The noise of the club seemed to fade, as if the air itself was different here. 3 men occupied the circular booth, their conversation halting as I appeared, but it was the one in the center who drew my attention like a magnet. He sat perfectly still, one arm stretched along the back of the booth, the other resting on the table near a tumbler of amber liquid. His suit wasn't flashy, but fit him like it had been poured onto his broad shoulders. Dark hair, closely cropped at the sides but longer on top, framed a face that belonged on ancient coins, all sharp angles and authority. But it was his eyes that made my breath catch, dark as burnt coffee, watching me with an intensity that made me feel simultaneously seen and stripped bare. I lowered my gaze, focusing on arranging the ice bucket. "Your champagne, sir," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. From the corner of my eye, I could see his companions, one lean with calculating eyes that seemed to be constantly moving, the other older with silver at his temples and a scar bisecting his right eyebrow. They weren't the typical Elysium crowd of trust fund kids and social media celebrities. These men carried a different kind of presence, a contained power that hummed like electricity. "Thank you," the man in the center said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through my chest. His accent held the faintest trace of something European, Italian perhaps. He made no move to take the bottle, and I realized he expected me to serve them. With hands that I prayed weren't visibly shaking, I removed the foil and wire cage, then eased the cork out with a controlled hiss rather than a celebratory pop. I poured an inch into a flute and offered it to him for approval. He didn't even glance at it. "Your hand is trembling," he observed instead, his eyes still fixed on my face. Heat rushed to my cheeks. "I'm sorry, sir. Long shift." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but a softening around the eyes. He took the glass from me, his fingers brushing mine in a touch that sent an inexplicable shiver up my arm. "What's your name?" "Sarah," I answered, surprised he'd asked. Customers rarely did. He tasted the champagne, then nodded. As I filled the glasses for his companions, I felt his gaze tracking my movements. "Sarah," he repeated, as if testing how it felt in his mouth. "You seem distressed. Is it just the long shift or something more?" The question caught me off guard. I looked up, meeting his eyes directly for the first time, and felt a strange pull, like standing at the edge of a high cliff, simultaneously terrified and tempted to step forward into the empty air. I started, then stopped as movement in my peripheral vision dragged my attention back to the main floor. Michael was walking directly toward the restrooms, which meant he would pass within feet of where I stood. Panic clawed up my throat. In that split second of terror and humiliation, I made a decision born of desperation. I turned back to the intense-eyed stranger and whispered urgently, "Could you pretend to be my date? My ex just walked in." The words tumbled out before I could consider their absurdity, asking a VIP client, a man who radiated dangerous power, to play act as my boyfriend. I immediately wanted to snatch them back, to apologize, to disappear through the floor. The man's eyebrows rose fractionally, and his companions exchanged glances I couldn't interpret. For one excruciating moment, he said nothing, and I prepared myself for humiliation. Then, with deliberate movements, he slid to the edge of the booth and stood. He towered over me, at least 6'2" of contained strength. Without a word, he placed his hand at the small of my back and guided me to stand beside him, angled so we were both visible from the main floor. "Which one?" he asked, his breath warm against my ear. Still stunned by his acquiescence, I nodded subtly toward Michael, who had paused to speak to someone. Blue shirt, dark hair, Rolex. Something hard flashed in the man's eyes. There and gone so quickly I thought I might have imagined it. His hand slid from my back to my waist, drawing me closer to his side. The subtle scent of him enveloped me. Cedar, expensive whiskey, and something uniquely male. "Follow my lead," he murmured, and then his expression transformed. The intensity remained, but now it was focused entirely on me, his lips curving into a smile that contained such intimate heat that I felt it like a physical touch. He lifted his other hand to brush my cheek, tucking that rebellious strand of hair behind my ear with a gentleness that belied the strength evident in his frame. "Cara mia," he said, loud enough to be heard by anyone passing. "You work too hard. Come, sit with me for a moment." My heart thundered against my ribs as Michael's steps faltered. I saw the moment he recognized me, his eyes widening in surprise, then narrowing as they shifted to the man at my side. For the first time since our breakup, I saw uncertainty in Michael's expression as he assessed the stranger, taking in the bespoke suit, the confident stance, the possessive hand on my waist, and clearly finding something that gave him pause. The stranger's thumb traced small circles at my hip, the gentle motion at odds with the predatory attention I could feel emanating from him. "Your ex seems concerned," he said quietly. "Perhaps he regrets his choices." "He should," I replied, surprised by the bitterness in my own voice. "He stole my savings and disappeared." The man went perfectly still for a heartbeat, and something dangerous flickered across his features. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped to a register that raised goosebumps along my arms. "Did he? How unwise of him." Michael was openly staring now, his date forgotten as she continued toward the restrooms alone. The stranger bent his head, his lips close to my ear, his free hand coming up to cup my jaw with exquisite tenderness. To anyone watching, we must have looked like lovers sharing an intimate moment. "I believe we've made an impression," he said, "but let's be certain, shall we?" Before I could respond, he tilted my face upward and brushed his lips against mine, a touch so light it could barely be called a kiss. Yet it sent electricity crackling through my veins. He pulled back just enough to meet my eyes, a silent question in his. In that suspended moment, with Michael watching and my future balanced on a knife's edge, I made my second impulsive decision of the night. I curled my fingers into the lapel of the stranger's jacket and pulled him down, pressing my mouth firmly against his. I meant it to be brief, just enough to sell our charade. But the moment our lips connected fully, something shifted. His hand slid from my jaw to the nape of my neck, fingers threading into my hair, cradling my head as he deepened the kiss, with an expertise that made my knees weaken. I gasped against his mouth, and he took advantage, his tongue sliding against mine, in an intimate caress that made me forget we were standing in a crowded nightclub, that this was meant to be pretend, that I didn't even know his name. When we finally broke apart, I was breathless, my lips tingling. Over his shoulder, I saw Michael's face contorted with a mixture of shock and something that looked remarkably like jealousy before he turned and stormed away. "He's gone," I whispered, my voice unsteady. The stranger's eyes had darkened to near black, his pupils dilated. "So he is," he agreed, making no move to release me. His gaze dropped to my mouth, and for a wild moment, I thought he might kiss me again. Instead, he reluctantly stepped back, though his hand remained at the small of my back. "Thank you," I said, reality crashing back. "I'm so sorry to have involved you in my personal drama. I don't know what I was thinking." "No apology necessary," he replied, his accent more pronounced now. "It was my pleasure." A discreet cough reminded me that we weren't alone. The man's companions were watching with expressions ranging from amusement to calculation. Mortification flooded me. "I should get back to work," I said, taking a step away. "Thank you again, Mr. Russo," he supplied. "Alessandro Russo." He reached into his jacket and extracted a sleek business card, pressing it into my palm. "Perhaps we could continue our performance another time, when you're not working." I stared at the card, heavy stock, embossed with just his name and a phone number. No company, no title. "Sarah, what the hell are you doing?" Marcos's angry voice cut through my daze. He stood at the edge of the VIP section, his face flushed. "You can't fraternize with clients. Back to work now, or don't bother coming in tomorrow." I flinched, shoving the card into my pocket. "I'm sorry, I have to go." Alessandro's expression hardened as he looked at Marcos, but he made no comment. Instead, he lifted my hand and pressed a kiss to my knuckles, a courtly gesture that felt both old-fashioned and thrillingly intimate. "Until we meet again, Sarah," he said, his eyes promising something I couldn't quite define. I hurried back to the bar, my mind reeling and my body humming with unfamiliar electricity. What had just happened? I'd asked a stranger to pretend to be my date, and ended up kissing him like my life depended on it. I'd probably get fired. And yet, all I could think about was the weight of his business card in my pocket and the lingering taste of him on my lips. I had no idea that I had just entangled myself with one of the most dangerous men in Chicago, a man who always took what he wanted, and who now, it seemed, wanted me. The rest of my shift passed in a blur. My body moved on autopilot, serving drinks, clearing tables, dodging wandering hands, while my mind remained stuck in that moment behind the curtain. The weight of Alessandro Russo's business card seemed to burn through the fabric of my pocket, and I found myself touching it periodically, as if to confirm that the encounter had actually happened. Michael had left shortly after our confrontation, his date trailing behind him with a puzzled expression. He'd stared at me from across the room before exiting, his face twisted with an emotion I couldn't quite place. Anger, certainly, but something else too. Something that looked uncomfortably like possession, as if he'd spotted someone handling an item he'd discarded but still considered his. Earth to Sarah. Damon's voice broke through my thoughts as I approached the bar for what felt like the 100th time that night. "You've been a million miles away. What happened in the VIP section?" I shook my head, unwilling to share the details. "Nothing. Just serve some champagne. Damon's eyebrow arched skeptically. Right. And that's why Marcos is fuming and threatening to fire you. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. And why the scariest man in Chicago couldn't take his eyes off you all night. My heart stuttered. What do you mean, scariest man? Damon glanced around before answering, his usual bravado dimmed. Alessandro Russo. You really don't know who he is? At my blank look, he let out a low whistle. Jesus, Sarah. The guy owns half of Chicago, the half that doesn't appear on tourist maps. Real estate, nightclubs, shipping. But word is, that's just the legitimate front. Cold dread pooled in my stomach. Front for what? What do you think? Family business? Old school Italian? Damon drew his finger across his throat in a slashing motion. They say he's cleaned up the operation since taking over from his father. But still, not a man you want to owe anything to. I swallowed hard, remembering the intensity in Alessandro's dark eyes, the controlled power in his movements. I don't owe him anything. Damon looked unconvinced. Well, whatever happened, his guy left this for you. He slid a sealed envelope across the bar. And Sarah, be careful. Men like Russo don't do anything without a reason. The envelope was heavy cream-colored stock, my name written on the front in bold, elegant script. I tucked it away unopened, next to the business card. Whatever it contained, I didn't want to read it under the flashing lights of Elysium with Damon watching my reaction. By the time my shift ended at 3 a.m., exhaustion had settled into my bones like concrete. I changed out of my uniform in the cramped staff bathroom, wiping away smudged mascara and futilely attempting to smooth my wrinkled street clothes. The face that stared back at me from the spotted mirror looked hollow-eyed and fragile, hardly the kind of woman who would attract the attention of a man like Alessandro Russo. The thought brought both relief and an unexpected pang of disappointment. I slipped out the back exit, into the alley that smelled of garbage and stale beer. The night air was cool against my flushed skin, carrying the first hints of autumn. Chicago in September always felt like a transition, summer's heat lingering during the day, while nights whispered of the coming winter. I pulled my thin jacket tighter around myself and began the walk to the L station, mentally calculating if I had enough money for a rideshare. The math was depressing. A sleek black Escalade idled at the end of the alley, its engine a quiet purr in the pre-dawn silence. I slowed my steps, wariness prickling along my spine. Working late nights, every woman developed a sixth sense about potential danger. I considered turning back, finding another exit, when the rear door opened. Ms. Winters. The voice was unfamiliar, not Alessandro's rich timbre, but clipped and professional. A man stepped partly out of the vehicle, his face in shadow. Not the mountain of a bodyguard from the club, but someone leaner, with calculating eyes I recognized from the VIP booth. Mr. Russo sent me to offer you a ride home. I took an instinctive step back. That's not necessary. It's nearly 4 a.m, and you live in Bridgeport. The L won't get you within 6 blocks of your building. He stated these facts without inflection, as if reciting from a dossier, which, I realized with a chill, he probably was. How do you know where I live? Mr. Russo likes to know who he's dealing with. He held the door wider. The offer is just a ride, nothing more. I hesitated, torn between rational fear and bone-deep exhaustion. The thought of waiting for the train, then walking those dark blocks alone, suddenly seemed more daunting than accepting this strange offer. What's your name? I asked. Vince. I've worked for Mr. Russo for 12 years. Something about his direct response reassured me. I approached the vehicle cautiously, still ready to run if necessary. Just a ride home? Vince nodded once. Just a ride. I climbed into the Escalade's plush interior, sinking into butter-soft leather. The warmth and comfort after hours on my feet was almost painful in its relief. Vince closed the door and returned to the front passenger seat. The driver, a broad-shouldered silhouette, didn't turn around. Your address? Vince asked. I gave it, then watched through the tinted windows as we pulled away from Elysium. The silence inside the vehicle was thick, but not uncomfortable. I found myself fighting to keep my eyes open. the gentle motion and warmth conspiring against my vigilance. My hand drifted to my pocket, where I could feel the edges of the envelope. With a deep breath, I pulled it out and broke the seal. Inside was a check. I stared at the amount, certain I was misreading the zeros in my exhaustion. But no, it was made out to me for $5,000, signed with a flourishing "A. Russo" at the bottom. There was a note as well, on the same heavy stalk as the envelope, written in the same bold hand. "For the inconvenience. I apologize for putting your employment at risk. Consider this compensation for any consequences. The offer of dinner still stands." I reread the note 3 times, my thoughts spinning. $5,000. It would cover my overdue rent with enough left over to pay bills for months. It was salvation wrapped in expensive paper. It was also, potentially, a trap. I looked up to find Vince watching me in the rearview mirror. "I can't accept this," I said, my voice tight. "Mr. Russo anticipated you might say that." Vince's tone remained neutral. "He asked me to tell you that there are no strings attached, no expectations, no debt." He paused. "He also said to tell you that he finds your reluctance refreshing but unnecessary. I barely know him. Why would he—" "Mr. Russo has his reasons," Vince cut in. "You made an impression." The Escalade pulled up to my building. A shabby 3-story walk-up that looked even more depressing in the pre-dawn glow. I hesitated, still clutching the check and note. "Please thank him, but tell him I can't—" "My advice?" Vince interrupted, turning to look at me directly for the first time. "Take the money. Pay your rent. Whether you call him after that is your choice." His expression softened fractionally. "Mr. Russo doesn't extend many second chances, or first ones for that matter." Before I could respond, the driver was opening my door. I stepped out onto the cracked sidewalk, the contrast between the luxury vehicle and my surroundings almost comical. "Good night, Ms. Winters," Vince said, and then they were gone, leaving me alone with a check that could solve all my immediate problems and create a host of new ones. I climbed the 3 flights to my apartment, each step an effort of will. The eviction notice still hung on my door, the threat no less real than it had been 12 hours ago. With trembling fingers, I unlocked the door and stepped into my tiny studio. It wasn't much, just 400 square feet of space that somehow had to function as bedroom, living room, and kitchen. But it was mine, the first place I'd had after leaving home. The thought of losing it sent a wave of panic through me so strong that my knees weakened. I sank onto the edge of my bed, Alessandro's check still in my hand. What would accepting it mean? What would he expect in return, regardless of Vince's assurances? But what choice did I have? I fell asleep with the check on my nightstand, and Alessandro's card still in my pocket, my dreams haunted by dark eyes and the phantom pressure of lips against mine. Morning arrived with harsh sunlight streaming through my cheap blinds and the insistent buzz of my phone. I groped for it blindly, squinting at the screen. Unknown number. "Hello?" I croaked, voice rough with sleep. "Ms. Winters, this is Elysium's management. We need to discuss your continued employment." I sat up, instantly awake. "Yes, of course. I can explain about last night." "There's nothing to explain," the crisp female voice cut me off. "Your position has been reevaluated. You're being transferred to our private events team, effective immediately. Your new schedule will be sent to your email." I blinked in confusion. The private events team was Elysium's most coveted position. Better hours, better tips, less harassment from drunk patrons. "I don't understand. Did Marcos approve this?" "This decision came from ownership," the woman said, a note of curiosity creeping into her professional tone. "Your first event is tomorrow evening. Please arrive at 5 p.m. for briefing." The call ended before I could ask any more questions. I stared at my phone, pieces clicking together in my mind. Alessandro Russo had said he owned nightclubs. Was Elysium one of them? Had he orchestrated this promotion? The thought sent a complicated mix of emotions surging through me: gratitude, resentment, and something warmer that I didn't want to examine too closely. I showered and dressed mechanically, then took Alessandro's check to my bank. Every step felt like moving deeper into unknown territory, but the imminent threat of homelessness made my decision for me. I deposited the check, paid my overdue rent online, and tried to ignore the little voice whispering that I'd just accepted the first thread of a web I might never escape. That afternoon, an elegantly wrapped box was delivered to my apartment. Inside was a black dress that looked simple at first glance, but revealed itself to be exquisitely made when I held it up, the fabric draped like liquid, the cut both modest and somehow sensual. A small card nestled in the tissue paper read simply, "For your first event." I should have been offended by the presumption. Instead, I found myself slipping the dress over my head, turning to examine my reflection in the bathroom mirror. It fit perfectly, accentuating curves I usually kept hidden under baggy clothes, making me look like someone who belonged in Alessandro Russo's world rather than serving drinks in it. I took it off quickly, hanging it carefully in my closet. This was moving too fast, boundaries blurring before I'd even established them. I needed to take control of the situation. Before I could talk myself out of it, I pulled out Alessandro's card and dialed the number. He answered on the second ring, Russo. The deep timbre of his voice sent an involuntary shiver through me. "It's Sarah Winters. From last night. Sarah." My name in his mouth sounded different somehow, weighted with meaning. "I've been hoping you'd call," I steeled myself. "Mr. Russo, I appreciate the check and the job adjustment, and the dress. But this is too much, too fast. I don't know what you want from me. What I want," he said slowly, each word deliberate, "is to have dinner with you, nothing more." "Why? You don't know me." There was a pause, and when he spoke again, there was a note in his voice I hadn't heard before. Something almost vulnerable beneath the confidence. "Because in a world of people who want something from me, you asked for only a moment of pretense. And even that, you're determined to repay." Another pause. "It's refreshing." I bit my lip, unsure how to respond. "The dress is a gift. Wear it tomorrow or don't. Your choice." He hesitated. "But I would very much like to see you in it. At dinner? Saturday night." The invitation hung between us. Part of me screamed to decline, to extract myself from whatever game this was before I got in too deep. But another part, a part I'd thought had withered after Michael's betrayal, sparked with curiosity and something that felt dangerously like anticipation. "I need to know more about you first," I said finally. "Damon, the bartender, he said things about you, about what you do." Alessandro's chuckle was low and without humor. "I imagine he did. Would you like me to deny them? Would your denial be truthful?" "Not entirely," he admitted, and the honesty surprised me. "I have interests in many businesses, Sarah, some more conventional than others, but I don't apologize for who I am or what I've built." "Is Elysium one of your businesses?" "Yes, so my new position was well-deserved," he finished. "Consider it correcting an oversight. Marcos is an idiot who wouldn't recognize talent if it served him a $1,000 bottle of champagne." Despite myself, I laughed. "That's very smooth." "I'm not trying to be smooth. I'm trying to be honest." His voice deepened. "I want to see you again, Sarah. The rest, we can discuss over dinner." I closed my eyes, weighing my options. The rational choice was clear. Return the check, decline the dress, ask for my old position back, and forget Alessandro Russo existed. The safe choice. But safety hadn't protected me from Michael's betrayal, from nearly losing my home, from the daily struggle to keep my head above water. Maybe it was time to take a risk, controlled, on my terms. "Saturday?" I agreed finally. "But I pay for my own meal." His laugh was genuine this time, rich and warm. "As you wish. I'll send a car at 8. I can meet you there. Humor me in this, Sarah. Chicago isn't always kind after dark, and I'd rest easier knowing you were safely escorted." The protectiveness in his tone should have raised red flags. Instead, it kindled a warmth in my chest that I hadn't felt in a long time. "All right. A car at 8. Until Saturday, then." "Until Saturday," I echoed, and ended the call. I placed my phone down carefully, as if it might detonate. What had I just agreed to? Dinner with a man Damon called the scariest in Chicago. A man who could get me promoted with a word, who knew where I lived, who sent me dresses that fit perfectly. A man who kissed like he was starving, and I was sustenance. Whatever game I was playing, the stakes had just been raised, and I wasn't entirely sure I knew the rules. The next evening, I stood in Elysium's private event space, barely recognizing my workplace. The main floor had been transformed into an elegant reception area, with crystal chandeliers casting warm light over linen-covered tables. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Chicago's skyline, the city lights beginning to twinkle as dusk descended. "First time upstairs?" asked a female server, noting my wide-eyed expression. Her name tag read, Lydia. I nodded. I was just transferred from the main floor. "Lucky you," she said, adjusting her bow tie. "Private events are a different world. Better tips, better clients, less harassment. Just don't screw up the wine service and you'll be fine." The event was a corporate anniversary celebration for a law firm. As I circulated with trays of hors d'oeuvres, I found myself scanning the crowd for a familiar face, though I knew it was unlikely Alessandro would attend. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, a prickling awareness at the nape of my neck that followed me throughout the evening. "Ms. Winters." The voice came as I was arranging empty glasses on a tray. I turned to find Vince, Alessandro's right-hand man, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit. "A moment of your time?" I followed him to a quiet corner, anxiety fluttering in my chest. "Is something wrong?" "Not at all. Mr. Russo asked me to ensure your first event was going smoothly." His gaze was assessing, but not unkind. "He also requested I deliver this." He handed me a small velvet box. My stomach dropped. "I can't accept jewelry." A hint of amusement crossed Vince's usually impassive features. "It's not what you think." I opened the box cautiously. Inside was a simple key on a silver chain. I looked up questioningly. "A gesture of goodwill," Vince explained. "The key is to a safe deposit box at First Meridian Bank, established in your name. Inside is the original copy of your debt to Velocity Financial." My breath caught. "My student loans? How did he—" "Mr. Russo has resources," Vince said simply. "The debt hasn't been paid. That would be presumptuous, but now you control it, not them. What you do with it is your choice." I stared at the key, my mind reeling. My student loans had been sold to Velocity Financial after I'd fallen behind on payments, the interest ballooning the original amount to something I could never hope to repay. Having control of the paper meant I could negotiate directly, potentially settling for pennies on the dollar. "Why would he do this?" I whispered. Vince straightened his already immaculate cuffs. "Mr. Russo values independence. He thought this might help you secure yours." He checked his watch. "I should let you get back to work. Enjoy your evening, Ms. Winters." He disappeared into the crowd, leaving me clutching the key, torn between gratitude and suspicion. Alessandro was systematically removing the financial burdens that kept me vulnerable. First the rent, now the looming student debt. But why? What did he expect in return? The question followed me home that night, and through the next day as I prepared for our dinner. I stood before my mirror in Alessandro's gift, the black dress that transformed me from overworked server to someone who might belong on the arm of a powerful man. The key from Vince hung around my neck, tucked beneath the fabric, a constant reminder of Alessandro's inexplicable interest. At precisely 8, my phone buzzed with a text. "Your car is waiting." I took a deep breath, grabbed my purse, and headed downstairs. The same black Escalade idled at the curb, but this time when the door opened, Alessandro himself emerged. He wore a tailored suit in deep navy, the crisp white of his shirt emphasizing the olive tone of his skin. His dark hair was styled away from his face, highlighting the strong line of his jaw and those intense eyes that seemed to see straight through my carefully constructed defenses. "Sarah," he said, my name a caress in his accented voice. "You look beautiful." I fought the warmth spreading through me at his appreciative gaze. "Thank you for the dress. It wasn't necessary." "Necessary, no, but worthwhile." He gestured to the car. "Shall we?" The restaurant was in a converted warehouse in the West Loop, its industrial exterior giving no hint of the elegance within. A maitre d' greeted Alessandro by name, leading us to a secluded table overlooking a courtyard garden illuminated with fairy lights. No reservation had been mentioned, no wait endured, despite the crowded dining room. "You come here often?" I asked as Alessandro held my chair. He sat across from me, his movements fluid and controlled. "I own it." Of course he did. "Is there anything in Chicago you don't own?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Many things. Most of them not worth having." The waiter appeared with a bottle of wine that hadn't been ordered, pouring a taste for Alessandro's approval. The choreography spoke of routine, of a man accustomed to deference. "You promised honesty," I said once we were alone again. "So tell me, who are you really, Alessandro Russo?" He studied me for a long moment, as if deciding how much truth to offer. "On paper, I'm a businessman with interests in real estate, hospitality, and shipping. My family came from Sicily 3 generations ago and built something lasting." He took a sip of wine. "Off paper, my operations sometimes exist in gray areas. Damon called you the scariest man in Chicago." Alessandro's expression hardened slightly. "Fear has its uses in my world, but it's not what I want from you. What do you want from me?" His gaze was unwavering. "Time, conversation, the pleasure of your company without pretense. And the money? The promotion? The dress? The key?" I touched the spot where it rested against my sternum. "Those don't feel like gifts without expectation. Not expectations, possibilities." He leaned forward, his intensity magnetic. "I saw you that night, Sarah, before you ever spoke to me, working yourself to exhaustion, carrying the weight of burdens that weren't of your making." His jaw tightened. "Then I saw your ex, living comfortably on what he stole from you. I recognized the injustice. So this is, what, charity? Justice? This is me removing obstacles that prevent us from meeting as equals." He reached across the table, his fingertips brushing mine in a touch that sent electricity up my arm. "I want to know you, Sarah Winters. The real you, not the version crushed by circumstance." The earnestness in his voice caught me off guard. I had prepared for manipulation, for seduction, for veiled threats, not for this disarming honesty. "Your past relationships," I began carefully, "were they also with women who needed rescuing?" His laugh was short and genuine. "Hardly. My previous entanglements were with women who understood the arrangement, companionship with clear boundaries and expiration dates." Something shifted in his expression. "Until you asked me to pretend, no one had surprised me in a very long time." Our conversation paused as the waiter brought our first course. Alessandro didn't look at the food. His eyes remained fixed on me. "I know what people say about men like me," he continued, his voice lower, "that we're possessive, dangerous, that we see people as assets to be acquired." He rotated his wine glass slowly. "Some of it is true. I am possessive of what I care about. I can be dangerous to those who threaten what's mine." A shiver ran through me, not entirely of fear, but I've never viewed people as property, Sarah. Loyalty, respect, even affection, these must be earned, not purchased. He met my gaze directly. "I don't want to own you. I want to earn the right to protect you, to provide for you, to—" He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "To be the person you choose to turn to." My heart raced at the intensity of his declaration. "You barely know me. I know enough to want more." His smile was both tender and predatory. "You're stronger than you realize. Despite everything, you've survived without compromising who you are. That kind of integrity is rare in my world." We ate, our conversation shifting to safer topics. My childhood in Michigan, his family's journey from Sicily, books we'd read, places we'd traveled. With each exchange, I found myself relaxing into his company, drawn to his sharp intelligence and unexpected humor. By dessert, I had almost forgotten who he was. Almost. But reminders came in subtle forms. The respectful distance other diners maintained, the constant vigilance of his security team positioned discreetly throughout the restaurant, the way his phone would buzz with messages he would glance at and dismiss with increasing irritation. "Sorry," he said, after the third interruption. "Business that shouldn't intrude on our evening." "Important business?" I asked. His expression cooled slightly. "Nothing I can't handle." He checked his watch. "Would you like to walk? There's a garden behind the restaurant." The garden was a small oasis, with stone pathways winding between carefully tended beds and softly illuminated trees. We strolled in comfortable silence until Alessandro paused beside a small fountain. "I've been monopolizing your time," he said, turning to face me. "You haven't told me what you want, Sarah." The question caught me off guard. What did I want? For so long, my desires had been confined to immediate survival. Pay rent, buy food, keep moving forward one day at a time. The luxury of wanting more had seemed impossible. I don't know, I admitted. To finish my degree, maybe. I was studying education before. I trailed off, the memory of Michael's betrayal still raw. Before your ex stole your future, Alessandro finished, anger flashing in his eyes. Tell me about him. I hesitated, but something in Alessandro's patient gaze made me want to unburden myself. We met in college. Michael was charming, ambitious. I thought we wanted the same things. A home, a family, a life built together. I swallowed hard. We pooled our resources. He had access to our accounts, including my college fund from my grandmother. One day it was all gone, along with him. Alessandro's face hardened into something dangerous. And the authorities said it was a civil matter. We weren't married. Both names were on the accounts. I shrugged, the gesture failing to convey the devastation I'd felt. I couldn't afford a lawyer to pursue it. His full name? Alessandro asked, his voice deceptively casual. Warning bells rang in my mind. Why do you want to know? Information is valuable in my line of work. I stopped walking. I don't want you to hurt him. Alessandro's expression softened. I won't harm him, Sarah. You have my word. He brushed a strand of hair from my face, his touch gentle. But men like that rarely steal only once, knowing his identity could protect others. The justification made sense, yet I sensed deeper motivations. Still, after everything Michael had done, did I owe him protection? Michael Delaney, I said finally. He works at Hartman Financial downtown. At least he did. Alessandro nodded, making no comment, but I saw the information register in his eyes, filed away for future use. It's getting late, I said, suddenly aware of how far I'd ventured into Alessandro's world in one evening. I should go home. Of course. He offered his arm, a courtly gesture that made me smile despite my unease. As we walked back to the car, he kept his pace matched to mine, his body angled slightly as if to shield me from the cool night air. At the Escalade, he paused. May I see you again? In the glow of the street lamps, his expression was unguarded, hopeful, almost vulnerable. It humanized him in a way that all his grand gestures hadn't. Yes, I said, the answer coming more easily than I'd expected. But no more gifts, no more financial rescue, just time together. As equals. His smile was slow and genuine. As equals, he agreed, though we both knew it wasn't that simple. He leaned down, his intention clear, giving me time to retreat. I didn't. Instead, I rose on my toes, meeting him halfway. This kiss was different from our first. Not a performance, but an exploration, gentle yet thorough. His hand cradled my face, thumb stroking my cheekbone with exquisite tenderness. When we parted, his eyes had darkened to midnight. Good night, Sarah, he murmured against my lips. Good night, Alessandro. As the Escalade carried me home, I touched my fingertips to my mouth, still feeling the imprint of his kiss. Whatever game we were playing, whatever web I was walking into, I was no longer certain I wanted to escape. 3 weeks passed in a blur of new routines. By day, I worked private events at Elysium, my new position bringing better hours and substantially improved tips. By night, I found myself increasingly in Alessandro's company. Dinners at exclusive restaurants, private concerts where we sat in box seats far from the crowd, quiet evenings in the library of his penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. Each encounter revealed new facets of the man behind the reputation. Alessandro was well-read, with a passion for history and philosophy. He spoke 4 languages fluently. He had a dry, unexpected sense of humor that emerged when he was relaxed. And despite his power and influence, he listened when I spoke. Really listened. With an intensity that made me feel seen in ways I never had before. We established boundaries, mostly at my insistence. I refused additional gifts, though flowers appeared with such regularity that my tiny apartment began to resemble a botanical garden. I declined his offer to move me to a safer neighborhood, instead, using my improved financial situation to repair the security features of my current place. I insisted on occasionally paying for our outings, though the disparity in our resources made this largely symbolic. Alessandro accepted these terms with grace, though I sometimes caught frustration flickering across his features when I rejected his more lavish offerings. His protective instincts ran deep, a fundamental aspect of his character that both attracted and concerned me. "You're stubborn," he observed one evening, as we sat on the terrace of his penthouse, the October wind carrying a chill that had him draping his jacket around my shoulders. Most women would have accepted the car by now. I smiled, inhaling his scent from the jacket's collar. "I'm not most women." His eyes darkened with something possessive. "No, you're not." He took my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. "That's precisely why I want to give you everything." "Things aren't what I want from you, Alessandro." "What do you want, then?" The question was soft, serious. I considered my answer carefully. What did I want from this dangerous, complex man who had upended my carefully constructed independence? "Honesty," I said finally. "Even when it's difficult. Even when you think I won't like what I hear." Alessandro studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Honesty," he agreed. "Starting now?" My pulse quickened. "Yes." He leaned back, his expression growing more guarded. "I had Michael Delaney investigated." The statement hung in the air between us. Part of me had expected this, had been waiting for it since I'd given Alessandro Michael's name in the garden. "And?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "He's done this before, 3 times that we could confirm. Women who trusted him, joint accounts emptied." Alessandro's jaw tightened. "He's also been laundering money through Hartman Financial for a rival operation. Small amounts, building over time." The information about Michael's other victims didn't surprise me, though it stung to know I wasn't special even in how he'd betrayed me. But the second revelation, a rival operation? You mean another crime family? Alessandro inclined his head. "The Donatellis. They control the north side. We've maintained an uneasy peace for years, but there have been provocations recently." I wrapped his jacket tighter around myself, suddenly cold despite its warmth. "What are you going to do about Michael? What would you like me to do about him?" The question was loaded, the power he was offering both tempting and terrifying. I could say the word, and Michael would... what? Be threatened? Beaten? Worse? "I don't want anyone hurt," I said firmly. Alessandro smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "There are many ways to bring a man like Michael Delaney to justice without physical harm, such as... information is a powerful weapon. Evidence of his financial crimes delivered to the right authorities, the recovery of assets he stole, returned to their rightful owners. Including me," I realized. "You could get my money back?" "I already have." Alessandro reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded bank statement. "It's been deposited into a new account in your name. The full amount, plus interest." I took the paper with trembling hands, staring at the figure. The grandmother's legacy that was supposed to have paid for my degree, the savings I'd believed were gone forever. "How did you—" I stopped myself. "I probably don't want to know." "Probably not," he agreed. "Though I assure you it was all quite legal. Pressure applied in the right places can work wonders." I folded the statement, emotions warring within me. Gratitude, yes, but also unease at the reminder of Alessandro's power, at how easily he could rearrange lives. Michael's, mine, countless others. "You're troubled," he observed. "I'm processing." I met his gaze directly. "This power you have, Alessandro, it scares me sometimes." He didn't deny it or offer false reassurance. Instead, he simply nodded. "It should. Power is like fire, essential, but dangerous when mishandled." He moved closer, taking my face between his hands with infinite gentleness. "I've never pretended to be a good man, Sarah. But for you, I try to be a better one." The sincerity in his voice weakened my defenses. I leaned into his touch, allowing myself to acknowledge what had been building between us for weeks. Attraction, yes, but something deeper too, a connection that had formed despite our different worlds, despite the danger signs I'd been trained all my life to recognize. "I don't want you to be good," I whispered. "I just want you to be real, to be honest." Then honestly, he murmured, his mouth hovering inches from mine. "I'm falling in love with you, Sarah Winters. And it terrifies me more than any threat I've ever faced." The confession stole my breath. Before I could respond, his lips claimed mine in a kiss that was both question and answer, seeking and finding. My arms wound around his neck as I surrendered to the heat building between us, weeks of carefully maintained restraint dissolving in an instant. His hands slid from my face to my waist, drawing me closer until I was practically in his lap. "Tell me to stop," he whispered against my mouth, even as his fingers traced the curve of my spine. "Don't stop," I breathed, surprising myself with my certainty. A groan rumbled through his chest as he lifted me, my legs wrapping instinctively around his waist as he carried me from the terrace into the penthouse. The bedroom was all masculine elegance. Dark wood, cream linens, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering city. But I barely registered the details, focused entirely on Alessandro as he laid me gently on the bed, his body following mine down. "Are you sure?" he asked, hovering above me, his control visibly strained. In answer, I pulled him down to me, losing myself in the heat of his kiss, the weight of his body, the security of his arms around me. For the first time since Michael's betrayal, I allowed myself to be fully vulnerable, to trust that I wouldn't be broken again. Alessandro's touch was reverent, as if I were something precious, something to be cherished rather than possessed. When we finally came together, the intensity of the connection overwhelmed me. Not just physically, but emotionally. A merging that felt inevitable and right, despite all the reasons it shouldn't. Afterwards, he held me close, his heartbeat strong against my cheek, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my bare shoulder. "Stay," he murmured into my hair. Not a command, but a request. I nodded, allowing myself to drift into sleep, feeling safer than I had in years, despite being in the arms of Chicago's most dangerous man. I awoke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the scent of coffee. Alessandro sat on the edge of the bed, already dressed in tailored pants and a crisp shirt, a cup in his hand. Another waited on the nightstand beside me. "Good morning," he said, the tenderness in his voice making my heart flutter. "Sleep well?" I stretched, conscious of his appreciative gaze tracking the movement. "Better than I have in months," he smiled, reaching out to brush hair from my face. "I ordered breakfast, whenever you're ready." I sat up, pulling the sheet with me in a gesture of modesty that seemed almost absurd after the intimacy we'd shared. "I should head home soon. I have the afternoon shift." Something flickered in his eyes, disappointment, perhaps, or concern. "I'll have Vince drive you." "Alessandro." I touched his arm. "Last night was amazing, but I still need my independence, my own space." He caught my hand, pressing a kiss to my palm. "I understand, and I respect it." His eyes met mine, serious again. "But the situation with the Donatellis is complicated at the moment. I'd feel better knowing you were safely transported." A chill ran through me. "Are you in danger?" "There's always an element of risk in my business," he said, evading the direct question. "But I take precautions." Before I could press further, his phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression hardening. "I need to take this. Breakfast is in the dining room when you're ready." He leaned down to kiss me briefly, then stepped into the hallway, his voice dropping to a tone I hadn't heard before, cold, authoritative, the voice of a man accustomed to giving orders and having them obeyed without question. I dressed quickly in yesterday's clothes, uncomfortably aware of the disparity between my simple attire and the luxury surrounding me. In the dining room, an elaborate breakfast waited, but Alessandro hadn't returned. I poured coffee, trying to ignore the hushed, urgent conversation coming from his study down the hall. When he finally emerged, his expression was carefully neutral, but I could sense the tension radiating from him. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Just business." He poured himself more coffee, his movements controlled. "Nothing for you to worry about," but there was something in his demeanor that made me push. "Honesty, remember? Even when it's difficult." Alessandro's jaw tightened, then relaxed on a sigh. "The Donatellis made a move against one of my shipping operations last night. Merchandise was taken. A man was injured." "Injured or killed?" I asked quietly. "Injured," he repeated firmly. I don't operate that way unless absolutely necessary, Sarah. But this provocation requires a response. The reminder of who he was, what he was, landed like a physical blow. What kind of response? He set down his cup, eyes calculating. It's better if you don't know the details. Alessandro, there are aspects of my life I can't share with you, he interrupted, his tone gentle but unyielding. Not because I don't trust you, but because I want to protect you. Knowledge can be dangerous in my world. I stood, suddenly needing distance. I should go. Hurt flashed across his features before he masked it. Of course. Vince is waiting downstairs. The ride to my apartment was silent, my thoughts in turmoil. Last night had changed things between us. Deepened a connection I wasn't sure I was ready to acknowledge. But the morning had brought reality crashing back. Alessandro wasn't just a man who happened to have wealth and power. He was involved in dangerous, likely illegal activities. Activities that put him at odds with equally dangerous people. And now I was entangled with him, more deeply than I'd intended. Vince pulled up to my building, but before I could exit, he turned to me with uncharacteristic hesitation. Ms. Winters, Sarah. May I speak frankly? Surprised, I nodded. I've worked for Mr. Russo for 12 years. In that time, I've never seen him as he is with you. Vince's expression softened slightly. He's trying to build something legitimate, something that could eventually leave the old ways behind. But transitions like that take time, and enemies don't respect the process. I absorbed this, understanding what Vince was trying to tell me. You're saying I should be patient with him. I'm saying he's changing for you. But change doesn't happen overnight. Vince's gaze was steady, and in our world, showing weakness can be fatal. Block 5. For 3 days after our night together, Alessandro and I communicated only through text messages, brief exchanges where he asked about my day, and I responded with carefully neutral updates. He didn't push for more, seeming to understand my need for space to process everything. The distance both relieved and ached, a contradiction I wasn't ready to examine too closely. On the 4th day, as I was preparing for my evening shift, a knock at my apartment door startled me. I approached cautiously, peering through the peephole to find Michael standing in the hallway. My heart stuttered with shock and instinctive fear. I hadn't seen him since that night at Elysium. Hadn't spoken to him since he'd emptied our accounts and vanished from my life. What was he doing here? I opened the door a few inches, keeping the security chain engaged. What do you want? Michael looked terrible, his normally immaculate appearance disheveled, dark circles beneath bloodshot eyes. Sarah, he said, his voice hoarse. I need to talk to you, please. We have nothing to talk about. I moved to close the door, but his next words froze me. It's about Russo. You're in danger, Sarah. A chill ran through me. I hesitated, then unlatched the chain, allowing Michael inside while maintaining a safe distance between us. Explain. Michael ran a trembling hand through his hair. The money I took from you, from the others. It wasn't just for me. I was paying off a debt to the Donatellis. They had leverage over me, things I'd done. He swallowed hard. But now they want more. They know about you and Russo. They're planning something, Sarah, something bad. Why would I believe anything you say? I asked, anger flaring beneath my fear. You stole from me. You disappeared without a word. I know, he said, his voice cracking. I know what I did was unforgivable. But I'm trying to make it right. I've been fired. My account's frozen. Somehow Russo got evidence of what I've been doing for the Donatellis, sent it to the feds. His eyes met mine, desperate. I'm going to prison, Sarah, but before that happens, I needed to warn you. I studied him, trying to separate truth from manipulation. Warn me about what, exactly? The Donatellis know you're Russo's weakness. They're going to use you to get to him. Michael stepped closer, his expression urgent. You need to get out of Chicago, tonight. Go somewhere he can't find you until this blows over. Alarm bells rang in my mind. Something about Michael's story felt wrong. Too convenient, too calculated to spark exactly the fear and doubt I was now feeling. How do you know all this? Because they approached me, he admitted. Wanted me to help lure you somewhere. When I refused, He pulled up his sleeve, revealing a mottled bruise. They made it clear what would happen if I didn't cooperate. So I'm warning you instead. I backed away, reaching for my phone. I'm calling Alessandro. No! Michael lunged forward, grabbing my wrist. You can't trust him, Sarah. You don't know what he's really capable of. His grip tightened painfully. I'm trying to protect you. We need to leave now. In that moment, I saw the truth behind his concern. Not care for my safety, but fear for his own. He'd been caught between two dangerous powers and was desperate for an escape route. I was just a shield, a bargaining chip. Let go of me, Michael, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I twisted my arm, breaking his grip with a move I'd learned in a self-defense class after our breakup. You're using me, again. Whatever mess you're in with the Donatellis, I'm not your way out. His face contorted with anger, the pretense of concern evaporating. You stupid bitch. Do you think Russo actually cares about you? You're a novelty to him, a plaything. When he's done, the door burst open, crashing against the wall with enough force to crack the plaster. Vince stood in the doorway, gun drawn, with two other men behind him. Michael froze, face draining of color. Step away from her, Vince said, his voice deadly calm. Now. Michael raised his hands, backing up. This is a misunderstanding. I was just attempting to kidnap Ms. Winters on Donatelli orders, Vince finished. We intercepted the communications, Delaney. We know exactly what you were supposed to do. My legs threatened to give way as the reality of the situation hit me. If Alessandro hadn't had people watching my apartment, take him. Vince instructed the men behind him. They moved forward, securing Michael with practiced efficiency. As they led him out, Vince approached me, holstering his weapon. Are you hurt? I shook my head, unable to speak past the knot in my throat. Mr. Russo is on his way, Vince said, his tone gentler than I'd ever heard it. Pack a bag. You can't stay here tonight. The implication that I might never be able to return to my apartment hung unspoken between us. My life had just fundamentally changed, again, because of my connection to Alessandro. By the time Alessandro arrived, I had packed a small suitcase with essentials, moving on autopilot, shock numbing my emotions. He entered like a storm, eyes scanning me for injuries before pulling me into his arms with careful strength. I should have had more security on you. He murmured into my hair. This is my fault. I pulled back to look at him, finding his face drawn with worry and barely contained rage. Where's Michael? Somewhere secure. The coldness in his tone sent a shiver through me. He'll answer for what he attempted today. Don't kill him, I said immediately, my voice breaking. Please, Alessandro, not for me. His expression softened slightly. I won't take his life, Sarah. You have my word. He brushed his thumb across my cheek. But he can't go unpunished. The Donatellis would see it as weakness. I nodded, understanding the reality of Alessandro's world more clearly than ever. What happens now? Now, I take you somewhere safe. He picked up my suitcase. This situation with the Donatellis has escalated beyond what I anticipated. Until it's resolved, you need protection. For how long? Alessandro hesitated, then answered with the honesty I'd asked of him. I don't know. These conflicts can end quickly or drag on for months. His eyes held mine, serious and intent. But know this. I will resolve it, and I will keep you safe, no matter what. I had no choice but to trust him. My apartment was compromised, my routine known to people who wished to use me against Alessandro. I was out of my depth in a game with stakes higher than I could comprehend. Alessandro's somewhere safe turned out to be a lakeside estate north of the city, a sprawling property surrounded by acres of woodland, and a security perimeter that would put most military bases to shame. The main house was a blend of modern architecture and old-world craftsmanship, with walls of glass overlooking Lake Michigan's vast expanse. My family has owned this property for 3 generations, Alessandro explained as we drove through the gates. It's the one place I know is absolutely secure. The next few days passed in a strange limbo. Alessandro divided his time between the estate and the city, attending to what he obliquely referred to as negotiations. When present, He was attentive and gentle, but I could sense the strain he carried, the weight of responsibility for both his organization and my safety. On the 5th night, I awoke to find him standing at the bedroom window, silhouetted against the moonlight reflecting off the lake. He wore only pajama pants, the sculpted planes of his back tense with unspoken burdens. "Alessandro?" I sat up, pulling the covers around me. "What's wrong?" He didn't turn. "The Donatellis have proposed a meeting. Tomorrow night." I slipped from the bed, crossing to stand beside him. "Is that good or bad?" "It could be either." He finally looked at me, his expression grave. "They could be seeking resolution, or it could be a trap." "Then don't go," I said, fear clutching at my heart. He smiled sadly. "If I don't go, it's seen as cowardice. The conflict escalates, more people get hurt." His hand cupped my face. "This is the reality of my world, Sarah. The responsibility I carry." I leaned into his touch, understanding washing over me. "This is what you meant about trying to build something legitimate. You're trapped between the old ways and the new." "Yes," he admitted. "I've been working for years to transition our operations to fully legal enterprises. But the old guard, both within my organization and among our rivals, resist change." His thumb traced my lower lip. "Meeting you accelerated my timeline, made me more determined to create a future where I don't have to hide parts of myself from you." The confession broke something open inside me. I reached for him, drawing him down into a kiss that conveyed everything I couldn't yet put into words. My fear for him, my understanding of his position, and the deepening feelings I could no longer deny. We made love slowly that night, with an intensity born of uncertain futures and unspoken fears. Afterwards, as he held me against his chest, I finally found the courage to voice what had been growing in my heart. "I'm falling in love with you too," I whispered. "And it terrifies me even more than your world does." His arms tightened around me, his heartbeat accelerating beneath my ear. "Sarah," he breathed, my name a prayer on his lips. "When this is over—" "Don't," I interrupted, pressing my fingers to his mouth. "No promises you might not be able to keep. Just come back to me tomorrow." He kissed my fingertips, eyes solemn in the darkness. "That I can promise." Morning brought a flurry of activity to the estate. Security briefings, weapon checks, contingency plans discussed in hushed tones. Alessandro moved through it all with calm authority, issuing directives that were followed without question. In these moments, I saw most clearly the power he wielded, the respect he commanded. By afternoon, preparations were complete. Alessandro found me in the library, where I'd been attempting to distract myself with books. "It's time," he said simply. I rose, crossing to him with steps that felt leaden. "How long will you be gone?" "A few hours, if all goes as planned." He took my hands in his. "Vince will remain here with you, along with our best security team. You'll be safe." "It's not my safety I'm worried about," I replied, my voice catching. Alessandro's expression softened. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. I was going to wait until this was resolved, but he opened it to reveal a delicate gold pendant shaped like a key. "To match the one you already wear," he explained. "A reminder that whatever locks life places before us, we have the means to open them together." Tears blurred my vision as he fastened the chain around my neck, the pendant settling beside the safe deposit key I still wore daily. The symbolism wasn't lost on me, from freedom from debt to a promise of shared futures. "Come back to me," I whispered, echoing my words from the night before. "Always," he promised, sealing the vow with a kiss that felt like both benediction and farewell. I watched from the window as his convoy of black vehicles disappeared down the driveway, my hands clutching both keys at my throat like talismans. The hours that followed were the longest of my life. I paced the estate, unable to settle, jumping at every sound. Vince maintained a stoic presence, offering reassurance with his calm confidence in Alessandro's abilities. "He's survived worse situations," he told me as evening descended with no word. "Mr. Russo is careful, strategic. He won't take unnecessary risks." But we both knew that in Alessandro's world, there were no guarantees. It was past midnight when headlights finally swept up the driveway. I rushed to the entrance, heart in my throat, Vince at my heels with his hand on his weapon. The front door opened to reveal Alessandro, his suit immaculate, but his face bearing a fresh cut above his eyebrow. Behind him stood his men, weary but intact. "It's done," he said simply, his eyes finding mine. "The Donatellis have agreed to terms. The conflict is over." Relief buckled my knees. I would have fallen if Alessandro hadn't crossed the space between us in 2 long strides, gathering me against him. I breathed in his scent, feeling the solid reality of him. Alive, whole, returned to me. "What happens now?" I asked when I could finally speak. Alessandro drew back enough to look into my eyes, his own filled with certainty. "Now we build something new, together, if you'll have me." In that moment, standing in the entrance hall of his family estate with the weight of the past weeks heavy upon us, I made my choice. Not in ignorance of who he was or the world he inhabited, but with full knowledge of both the man and the power he wielded. I chose the complexity of loving Alessandro Russo, with all that entailed. "I'll have you," I said. The words both acceptance and promise, all of you, the good, the bad, the dangerous, the gentle, everything you are. His smile was transformative, years of tension seeming to fall away as he lifted me into his arms, spinning us in a circle of joy that echoed through the grand foyer. 6 months later, as spring breathed new life into Chicago, I stood in the garden of Alessandro's estate, our estate now, watching as workers transformed the space for the evening's event. White chairs lined a petal-strewn aisle, fairy lights twinkled in the trees, and an arbor of roses marked the spot where, in a few hours, I would officially become Mrs. Russo. The engagement had been swift but not impulsive, the natural culmination of a relationship forged in fire. True to his word, Alessandro had accelerated his transition to legitimate business, though I harbored no illusions that the process was complete or without complications. Some shadows would always cling to the Russo name. Some enemies would never forget the old ways. But we faced those challenges together, my strength complementing his protection enabling my growth. I had returned to school, my education funded by the recovered savings, my future shaped by my own choices rather than by necessity or fear. Having second thoughts, Alessandro's voice came from behind me, warm with amusement. By tradition, we shouldn't see each other before the ceremony, but Alessandro had never been one for conventional rules. I turned to find him resplendent in his tuxedo, dark eyes dancing with happiness as he took in my simple white dress. "Not a single one," I assured him, stepping into his embrace. "You?" "Only that I waited so long to find you." He brushed his lips against my forehead. Who would have thought that a desperate request in a nightclub would lead us here? I smiled against his chest, remembering the frightened, exhausted woman I'd been, asking a dangerous stranger to pretend to be something more. "Could you pretend to be my date? My ex just walked in," I quoted softly, the most reckless words I've ever spoken. "The most fortunate words I've ever heard," Alessandro countered, tilting my face up to his. "They led me to the greatest truth of my life, that power and wealth mean nothing without someone to share them with. Someone who sees past the reputation to the man beneath." As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting golden light across the lake, I stood in the arms of Chicago's most dangerous man, my protector, my partner, my future. The journey that had brought us together had been fraught with peril and uncertainty, but the destination was worth every step. "Ti amo, mia Sara," Alessandro murmured against my lips. "Per sempre." "I love you too," I whispered back. "Forever." And as we sealed the promise with a kiss, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Equals in a bond, forged by pretense but strengthened by truth, the most powerful force of all.